All right, so in a previous video, we took a look at the string variable or the string type and how to declare string variables. So how to name them, how to initiate or initialize their values, and how to assign values to them. So let's take another look at the string variable. In this case, or in this video, we're not going to look at how to actually instantiate or assign the values. We're really only going to be talking about the naming of the variables. So we're going to pay special attention to how we're naming our variables and what you can and can't do um, when you declare or define new names for them. So this doesn't apply only to strings. There are other different types of data types in Java, and we'll cover those in later videos. But for now, we'll just use strings as examples here. So in this example, we have a string variable defined on line 3, and we named it city, and it's been assigned the value of Helsinki. On line 5, we're printing out that value. So if we run this, we should get the value of the uh, the variable named city printed out, and that value is Helsinki, and we have that down here. So it's printed out correctly. What happens though, or what typically happens with new developers is that they accidentally mistype the name of the variable that you're trying to work with. So for example, they might type out city with a capital Y, thinking, well, my variable name is city, it's CITY, um, but in reality, there is no variable in your code named city with a capital Y. You only have one variable named city, all lowercase. So if I run this, what happens? I get an error. And in Java, whenever you run into errors, you'll get this lengthy message. It's called a stack trace. And it looks kind of scary, but it's pretty straightforward. It tells you exactly what went wrong and exactly where it happened. So in this case, it's telling us that there's an error on line 5, so somewhere in here, and the error is right here. It's pointing right at it, city. So it's this here, and it's saying more specifically, it cannot find that symbol, city with a capital Y. And that's because, again, you don't have a variable named city with a capital Y. You only have one variable called city, yes, but with city with a lowercase y. So to fix this, you just replace that capital Y with a lowercase y. You run that again, and now your Java compiler should recognize this. And it does, and it prints out the value. So great, it's working. So what if I have another city I want to store a name for? What if maybe I want to store the value for Vienna, right? I'm going to define that here, and I'm going to run this. So what happens? Okay, so we get another error. So in this case, the issue is that the variable named city is already defined. So what Java is trying to tell us here is that you cannot name two different variables the exact same variable name. So in this case, on line 4, I'm declaring a new string variable, and I'm also naming it city, and I'm assigning it a value. The problem is I can't do that because the name city is already taken. It's already being used on line 3. So to fix that, I need to change one of my existing variables, one of these two variables. I need to change their names. So I can maybe add a 1 at the end of the variable holding Vienna, and then print that out, right? So I can print this out, and that'll print out Vienna. And that would work, but yeah, just always keep that in mind. You cannot name two variables the exact same thing. Okay. Um, Now another thing to keep in mind is you can't, when you name your variables, regardless of what data type they are, you can never start the name of those variables with a number. So in this case, I'm just going to comment this out for now. Looking at line 3, city with the value of Helsinki, I can't put a 1 in front of that name. So I can't start the name of the variable with a number. So if I run this, Java will give me an error. It'll complain about it because Java interprets numbers differently than it interprets alphabetic characters like CITY, right? So if this doesn't mean that I can't have a number in my variable name. I can. It can't be the very first one. It can't be the very first character in the variable name. It can be the second, like this. It can be the third, like that. It can be the fourth, like this. It can be the last one. It doesn't matter. Um, so long as I don't have a number at the very beginning as the first character of my username or my variable name, it's it won't work. So um, so let's bring back Vienna. So now a third consideration for when you declare new variables in Java is to always name your variables something descriptive, something valuable, something that when you look at the name of the variable, you know exactly what it's referencing, what it's referring to, and what it holds. So in this case, the name city, the if you know that your variable is going to hold the value Helsinki, maybe just name it Helsinki. It's because city is not super descriptive. If you know that you're going to be holding a city, but what city is it? So let's name it Helsinki. It's a lot more descriptive. You know exactly what it holds. Um, and it looks cleaner too. So Vienna for Vienna, if I run that, so this should give me an error. Yeah, it gives me an error because we're asking Java to print out the value of the variable city, except the variable city doesn't exist anymore because we changed the name of this string from city to Helsinki. So let's change this to Helsinki. And I'm going to add a second print statement below this one to print out the value of Vienna and run. Okay, cool. So now I'm printing on line 6 the value of the variable named Helsinki, which is down here. And on line 7, I'm printing out the value of the variable Vienna, which holds the name Vienna, and that prints out down here. Great. So we covered 3 things here. So we covered the naming of your variables and how important it is to make sure that you don't accidentally mistype the name of the variable that you're trying to reference, right? So typically it's something to do with casing. So just really careful about that. The second consideration is making sure you never name your variables the exact same thing. So never name 2 different variables the exact same name, because Java can't differentiate between this variable and that variable. So be careful with that. And lastly, make sure you always give your variable names some nice descriptive names. So it's okay to have it be named city, but what city exactly is it, right? Is it Chicago? Is it DC? Is it Portland? Is it Vienna? Right? Just always make sure you give your variable name some very descriptive names. And one last final thing to cover here. What if you do want to reuse? Well, what if you have a variable? Let's say city name, and what if the value of that variable changes? So you can actually change the value of variables pretty easily in Java. So just to kind of drive this point home, I'll print out the value of city name, and then I'll take that same variable, which is city name, and just do what's called reassigning it. So I'm taking the name of the variable that I want to reassign. In this case, it's city name, and I'm giving it a new value. So initially, it was initialized as Helsinki. I'm going to change it to Vienna, and then I'm going to print it out again. I'm going to print out the exact same variable, which is, again, city name. So I'm going to have two print statements, but they should both have different values because I'm reassigning the same variable to different values. So let's walk through this. So on line 3, I'm instantiating my string variable. I'm naming it city name, and I'm giving it the value Helsinki. On line 5, I'm printing out the value of whatever is inside of my city name variable, which in this case is Helsinki. At this point, it should be still Helsinki. And yeah, it's printing out Helsinki down here. Then after the print statement, so after this gets printed out, on line 7, I'm taking that city name variable and I'm reassigning it to Vienna. So reassigning just means that you're taking the value or the variable and you're giving it a new value. You're reassigning the value of an existing variable. Okay, so that's what we're doing on line 7. And then finally on line 9, I'm just printing out that same variable, but now I want to see what the new content is in it. So it'll just print out what the value is in it at this point. And at that point on line 9, it should be holding Vienna because we changed the value of that variable here. And so you'll notice that in reassigning a variable, there's no need to specify string before it. And that's because you only need to specify the data type of a variable when you're creating one. Okay, we don't need to create city name again because we already created it on line 3. We only want to reference it. We only want to tell Java, I want you to isolate this particular variable, city name, and assign to it the value of Vienna. So if I were to add string before the city name variable, what I'm actually doing is I'm not reassigning it. I'm creating a new variable with the name city name. And again, as we mentioned earlier, you can't do that. You can't create two different string variables and name it the exact same thing because Java has no way of differentiating between whether you're referencing this variable or this one. So it can get kind of confusing, but just remember that if you're going to be reassigning variables, which is pretty common, don't specify the data type of that variable. Just specify the name and specify whatever you want to assign or change this variable to. So in this case, I want to isolate the city name variable and I want to change its value to Vienna. And I'm verifying that that actually happened by printing out the value here again. So make sure you keep these things in mind. And these are things that actually apply to all programming languages, not just Java. So make sure you're always careful and keep these things in mind.